Good afternoon. This is Curt Erickson doing a video presentation for Dynamics in Power and Organizations Org 515 class, Dr. Paul Katsampis. Hopefully, Dr. Paul, I pronounced your name correctly. If not, I apologize. The leader that I've selected this week to do an analysis of their unethical influence and the tactics that they utilized really stems from the number of sexual harassment claims that have been filed against significant leaders in organizations over the last 6 months. If you think about Fox News with Michael Ayers, Bill O'Reilly, recently with Harvey Weinstein, Matt Lauer, and a number of other Hollywood celebrities that have come to light recently, I've actually selected Matt Lauer as my person to take a look at their power and influence and the ethics that they have involved. With Mr. Lauer being the number one morning talk show or TV host in that entire genre, he's the highest compensated and also the number one face for NBC News, where he was up until the date that he was released. With his power and his influence, there's a couple of things that come to play. When we look at these leaders of organizations or leaders of a news media, there's a couple of things that come to mind with Mr. Lauer. Number one, his charismatic personality in the role that he has as a morning talk show host. He was very well respected, but behind the scenes, there's some really some darkness that has just been brought to light recently. In the articles, there was a number of things written about his coercive attitude and the way he exercised basically his status and reputation as a leader. With the sexual harassment charges, there were a number of young ladies who have filed charges against him to the point where they gave detailed information about him, where he had sexual intercourse with a young lady in his office who passed out and was taken to the nurse at NBC. In addition, it came to light that there is a button underneath his desk where he could lock his door from his desk and incarcerate a person in his office to perform these sexual harassment tactics. So really his abuse of his prestigious power and his reputation would have these young interns or young associates want to be affiliated with Matt, and he would abuse that power. There's also a component there where the follower has some responsibility in that the sexual harassment just didn't happen overnight. There had to be inklings of it. Similar to Harvey Weinstein, when it finally came to light, it was the unwritten rule in Hollywood that this had been going on for decades. So there's a bit of culpability on the part of the followers too for this harassment charge to be levied. So let's talk about power in the organization of NBC. If the organization similar to NBC doesn't have a reporting structure in place where if someone has a complaint or an issue about sexual harassment or abuse of power, to where they can report it to their immediate supervisor and go up through the human resource group to ultimately conduct an investigation and have results from that investigation, that can be a red flag, and it can be a big issue for the organization. The fallout from the situation with Matt Lauer is just beginning. Granted, they have terminated him from the company, but when you have a sexual harassment case, there's a couple of components. You have a quid pro quo. You also have a hostile work environment. And the litigation is just now beginning to where NBC will be held liable for Mr. Lauer's behavior. Also, Matt Lauer will be held accountable for his own individual behavior. And recently, his wife has just hired an attorney also to file divorce proceedings from Matt Lauer. So there's a number of litigation aspects that are just now beginning, and there probably will be more complainants come forward as this continues through the court process. So in a power organization like NBC, they need to make sure that they have these stopgaps in place, a good reporting structure so that these sexual harassment charges or any abuse of power can be reported and it can be handled appropriately at the beginning, so we don't get to the end where we have these catastrophic situations with a employee within the organization. The next question to answer is, what's the outcome? The outcome with Mr. Lauer is he's been terminated. His personal appeal within the nation has tanked. His ability to earn a living at this point will be almost non-existent. There will be nobody who will want to hire somebody of his stature that will be convicted of sexual harassment. So, and from an organization standpoint, there will be fines levied, there will be court costs, and there will be ultimately a settlement similar to Fox News that settled for about $86 million to settle the harassment cases of Bill O'Reilly and Mr. Robert Ayers. As a leader of this organization, if I were the leader of the organization, I would make sure that we have a couple of things. First, we would have a reporting structure such that when a complainant brings this forward, that we have an investigative group that can go in, investigate any of these abuses of power to make sure that we address them, in the seminal period, to make sure that we don't get to a point where we did with NBC with Matt Lauer. Second, we need to make sure that there's a sufficient level of training of harassment to make sure that our employees in general understand what harassment is and what's tolerated from an organization. And quite frankly, no organization should tolerate what Mr. Lauer did, and I applaud NBC for taking that action to terminate him immediately. It happened really within 48 hours of the complaint. The last item of the complaint process is there has to be ongoing training, not only the initial training, but there needs to be a recurrent training. So when you're completing your recurrent training, the aspect of making sure that people understand and make sure that they're compliant with the abuses of power. And the final component is NBC would probably need to look at, or I would look at as a leader, is let's take a look at the hiring process. When we're looking at the hiring process, are we doing behavioral interviewing that will help indicate the right kind of moral behaviors that we're looking for as an organization? This person, Mr. Lauer, he was morally flawed. And going forward, you have to put into place a behavioral interview process that will weed out these folks so that you don't bring them into an organization that can be catastrophic. Those are my video thoughts for today and the Chapter 4 Critical Thinking Assessment. Thank you.